Hello and welcome to QMH, where we look at mental health from a queer perspective. That will include in-depth looks at topics. For example, in the coming weeks I will look at the stages of coming out as well as the complexities of same-sex attracted relationships. We will also look at issues that are currently happening that can have an impact on a queer person's mental health. And this week there have been a number of news items that fit this description. My name is Chris, I'm a sex therapist, health educator and researcher, and I'm joined by my partner in crime Seb, who has almost a decade of involvement in corporate queer organisations as well as sits on the board of a large queer youth charity. So this week has been a busy week for queer related news. Two of them are to do with sport, aren't they, Seb?
Yes. So we've had the first story being in relation to Semenya, the South African runner who's faced some roadblocks, I suppose, with the final result of the court appeal, and also what's happening at the moment with Israel Folau.
So let's start off with the Semenya story, which you and I have followed athletics for quite some time, and she's a brilliant athlete to watch.
Yeah.
So what is can you give us in a nutshell what's actually been happening there?
So really this has been happening over a number of years, where she's faced criticism from fellow athletes and other members of the sport who believe that she has an unfair advantage. So it started out from a very young age. She had to prove her gender even as a child, then growing up. And more recently in the sport, because she's been winning so much, I suppose, she's faced allegations again with regard to her gender. She's had to prove her gender a number of times. And most recently, she's been determined, I suppose, as a female athlete with a difference in sexual development, or DSD.
So who's declared that? Because that sounds like that's a major decision by somebody. Like, is it a medical or is it the sports body that overlooks it?
So this is a ruling that's the IAAF has come out with back in April 2018, that if there, for any female athletes with differences in sexual development, which is a category that Semenya falls into, if they wish to compete in the future, they have to take hormone suppressants for any events between 400 meters to a mile.
Now, has she come out? There's been articles I saw on like the ABC that they describe her as intersex. Has she come out saying that she's intersex, or is it just the ruling athletics body that it has declared her as intersex?
So she has always said that she is a woman, and all of her supporters have all said that she is a woman. And this really goes back to what this means to be a woman. She's faced huge criticism over the years of how she looks, how she speaks, and really this comes back to the number of people, whether it be ruling bodies or others, as to what it means to be a woman, whether it's creating an idea of what it means to be a woman or just maintaining the sort of mythical idea of what it means. And, over the years in sport, this has been an ongoing issue.
So the Intersex Society for North America describes intersex as a general term used for a variety of conditions in which a person is born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definition of male or female. And so she's had to over and over again go through physical examinations. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And so now they're saying she has to be on testosterone blockers.
That's right. Which is, really an untried and untested answer to this particular issue, which may actually have negative health consequences for her, let alone from a sporting perspective.
Now she is out publicly as being a lesbian. She's married to a long-time girlfriend.
Yes.
She is this. Have they come out and sort of said, like, does she have fetally androgenized females, or are they just sort of saying she has a naturally high testosterone? You know, she's, you know, cheating is like it feels from these articles and from these stories that there's a pointing of the finger that you're too good.
Well, I mean, that's part of the problem. You know, she's done nothing wrong, but this issue of unfair advantages on a biological level has been going on for a number of years. So if we go back to 2015 with the case of the Indian runner Duty Chand, in her again, she faced sort of similar criticism as Caster Semenya did, and the IAAF was asked to prove what kind of advantage having high testosterone levels has on professional female athletes. The data they came back with in 2017 was about a 3% advantage.
That's nothing.
No, and on top of that, of course, there's been wide criticism of that data by professionals in the field of, you know, up to a fifth of that data was actually erroneous.
Because a lot of these cases, a lot of the times these people with females with androgen issues, they might have it in their blood, but the body doesn't absorb it. Therefore, it's just excess. It's useless. It's not actually being used. It's no advantage to them.
The most famous case of that was Maria Jose Martinez Patiño, the former Spanish hurdler in the mid-'80s. So she, again, faced criticism of, you know, being too manly. At that point in time, the test by the professional sporting bodies was a sex chromatin test, which she failed because she's a 46XY individual. But on top of that, she also has...
What does that mean? What does a 46...
So that's a form, again, of sort of intersex. So her sex chromosomes, she has XY chromosomes.
Yeah.
But on top of that, she also has androgen insensitivity syndrome. So as you say, she might have a high level of testosterone in her bloodstream, but it makes no difference at all to her performance as an athlete. And so the comment at the time was that, you know, she's being disqualified for an advantage she did not have.
And I remember that she was stripped of all her medals and everything, and that's kind of what they're trying to do here with the Caster Semenya story. Is like she's winning too much.
She's too good, and again, it's through no fault of her own. She's just excellent at what she does, and there's a biological reason for it.
Would this happen if it was a man?
That's a very good question. You know, the IAAF, at least in athletics anyway, so, you know, they've now instituted these, what is an acceptable level of testosterone to have in your blood if you're a female athlete. Are there acceptable levels for a male athlete? You know, who's to say what is normal, to use that word, for a male athlete compared to a female athlete?
Yeah. There must be levels because they do the blood doping test to sort of see, but still, like, if she has a natural advantage, then it does seem, even if she doesn't fit, or she doesn't identify as intersex, she identifies as a lesbian, she has this natural occurring, it is somebody being punished or being hunted down for the way they are born. She cannot help how she is.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you know, athletics is all about, you know, excelling to the best of humans' abilities. Who can run the fastest? Who can swim the fastest? Who can throw a javelin the furthest? And in one sense, she was born to be an athlete because this is what she is good at, and there's a reason for it. And why should she be punished just because of who she is?
One of the themes that's going to go through today's podcast is language, and I saw there was a report on, I think, by the BBC. They interviewed somebody representing the Athletics Association, and they described that the decision by Cass, who oversaw the hearings, she described it as standing up for the normal. So do you think language like that in a sport like you said, that excels for the best. We want, as spectators, to we want to watch the best. Do you think using language like that for young LGBTIQ people to hear someone being described as you're normal and you're abnormal, do you think that has a big impact?
I think it does, and especially in the female area, part of the sport is where you see it the most. You know, all the way back to, I remember as a big tennis fan in the late 90s when Martina Hingis lost to Emily Mauresmo and she was, she plays like a man. And that was just horrible to think. And again, this goes back to this idea that some people have, or different people have a different idea of what it means to be a woman. And because she looked different and she played differently, that was somehow unacceptable on some level.
So we want them all to be petite and feminine, and there was, like, slightly off topic, there was this article the other day in one of the papers that why does armpit hair cause so much disgust? It's because we have this ingrained idea of what it is to be a woman, and we see it mostly in sports particularly. Like there was the controversy a couple of weeks ago with the AFL Women's League with the kick, that photo of the female kicker.
Yes.
Brilliant photo. She's a brilliant athlete, and yet it was demonized. It's, you know, showing a bit too much.
Yeah.
And yet they compared it to a classic photo of the 80s from a male player who was in the same stance. So the same standards are not being, you know, if you've got, if you're physically got an advantage as a man, great. You get all the endorsements.
Exactly, yeah. And again, you know, in terms of the differences between what we think to be normal and what we don't, you know, we've got people like Michael Phelps, who, you know, has a slower buildup of lactic acid compared to other athletes. And no one's telling him to, you know, inject more lactic acid to bring him down to the level of everybody else. We have the Australian cyclist...
Cadel Evans.
Cadel Evans, who... you know, is able to absorb more oxygen in his lungs. And, you know, none of his competitors are saying, that's an unfair advantage to have. And again, going back to your original question around, you know, the language that people use, you know, when you're either a young woman or a young, you know, person who identifies as intersex or, you know, transgender or what have you, when you hear this and you see this sort of stories coming out and saying, again, it's sort of driving towards some mythical idea of what it means to be a female athlete, it can really, you know, put you down and think, well, obviously, if they don't fit in, and in the case of Caster Semenya, you know, she's the best, and they don't want her to fit in some sense.
They want mediocrity.
Where does that leave people who aspire to be athletes?
Yeah.
It's going to turn them away.
And there's always that... even if you're not identified as LGBTIQ, even if you're a straight woman going into sport, you are there is that, she must be a lesbian. It's like, what is wrong with women excelling at sport? And
or at least if you excel at sport, you still have to look a certain way.
Yeah.
We have this mythical idea of what it means to be a female athlete, and therefore you have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you have to play a certain way.
Yeah.
And in the case of, you know, Caster Semenya and Patino and Dudi Chand, you also have to be chemically a certain way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not female enough to participate, and you'll face criticism from your fellow athletes.
Or as that Representative Cass sort of said, you're not normal. Which is a good point to lead into our next topic about use of language. While we speak today, Israel Folau's day 2 of his hearing regarding his contract with the Rugby Australia is being heard. And that they reckon that the findings of the hearings are meant to be found later this week, but it actually could take weeks or even months, and some are even speculating that it could take years because the case is complex because of the contract. But going back to what he said, so we're talking about just before Easter, he posted an image up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook that read the following. So this is what the post read. Warning, drunks, homosexuals, adulterers, liars, fornicators, thieves, atheists, idolaters, hell's awaiting you. Repent, only Jesus saves. Now, again, we enjoy watching rugby. We follow, and you want to support your team. But these language, again, how do you think it has an impact when someone, this is, and let's stress, this is not the first time.
Exactly.
He's made homophobic comments. What do you think it does for young LGBTIQs?
So, I mean, first of all, I guess, there are lots of different fans of rugby. Some of them are straight, some of them are gay, some of them are, male, female, everything. And it's disappointing to hear, in one sense it's not surprising because it's not the first time, but it's still disappointing to hear that kind of language being shared. And then in the ensuing controversy to then see, a lot of support coming for his, what they call a religious stance from other members of other teams. So especially, when you are, a rugby fan and you are part of the LGBTIQ community, hearing those kind of comments is really disappointing. But especially when you're a young person, starting to come to terms with your sexuality, and going through all that kind of stress in the first place, to, on top of that, to then have this kind of commentary from people you might look up to, people you might, idolize, people you might follow, it can be a devastating impact.
Often when people sort of do come out, they go through that phase of where they don't want to be possibly seen as the cliche homosexual. And you're right, there is such a variety of LGBTIQs that, some like playing rugby, others like doing drag, and it's this broad, wonderful spectrum. So you're right, sort of his comments are kind of pushing people away from actually being themselves.
Yeah. And as I said, it's not just the LGBTIQ community. It's lots of people who might have friends or family members or what have you who just believe in the equality of all people. When you're a rugby fan and you see this kind of commentary coming out, it turns lots of people away.
And that's going back to our first conversation. That is what sports is about. It's about being the best. Your sexuality, your gender. On the day, it's the best person who wins. What do you think, or how do you think, then, I should say, the ARU has handled this?
It's very tricky because on the one hand, they have multiple different sporting bodies that come out and said that they want to build a more inclusive culture. We've seen far too much over the years in terms of play behaviour and what have you, where the bodies themselves have to come out and say, and educate their players as well in terms of respect for women. And then, to build their inclusivity in terms of the LGBTQ plus community. So on the one hand, and, to complicate things further, they also want to build an inclusive culture, which is also inclusive of religion. And all of that is fine and it's reasonable. I think the point where you need to draw the line then is when your beliefs clash, well, not even clash, but when they start to negatively impact other people, that's when you need to draw the line. It's, these couple of posts by Israel Folau aren't his first religious posts. He's made numerous religious posts and nothing is wrong with that. And no one has said that anything's wrong with that. But when you start to draw the line is when you say, my beliefs are this, and then because of this, I think these people are going to hell. And as I said, that can be a terrible thing to see from someone that you look up to.
Continuing sort of from the last bit about Caster Semenya, that use of words, that you are different. From your perspective with a youth organisation, what impact can these type of language have on a young person?
Now, as I said before, it can be really devastating, especially as a young person coming to terms with sexuality and going through all the stresses that are associated with that. And then on top of that, seeing this kind of language prevailing in the sport that you love, from people who you look up to or your family might look up to. It, on the one hand, on a personal level, it can drive people to drug use, even suicide. On the other hand, it can then drive your family to kick you out of home. And you can imagine what it'd be like being, 13, 14 years old, being kicked out of home because of who you are, which is, a belief that is supported by a sports person you look up to. And then you're on the streets.
We saw during the marriage equality debate here in Australia that the homophobia it came out of the closet. Do you think if he wins his case, no matter how it's actually looked at, whether it be just because the ARU didn't put something in its contract or something, will it be seen as it's okay to say whatever you want without consequences?
I think there's still enough belief in the community that what he said was wrong. And a number of different clubs and organizations have already come out and said that kind of language or that kind of expression is unacceptable.
Michael Chicker, the coach of the Wallabies, came out and said he's not welcome back, and Peter Beattie, the chair of NRL, has also said he's not welcome in the code. So you've had two big sort of people come out and stand up for diversity. I think the former English coach has also come out and sort of said there's no place, and there's been reports in France as well where the media over there has sort of said he's not welcome because of his homophobic views. So rugby itself seems to be quite united. There have been some other players, though, that have come out and sort of said, well, if he gets fired, we're all walking type thing. Yeah.
Which it's really interesting, even aside from a diversity perspective, just purely from a sports perspective. In the past, he came out and said, look, if my religious beliefs ever cause this much problem, I'm happy to walk away. He's now not done that. The ARU said, offered him $1 million to walk away, and he still said no, and he's going to fight this. So you really have to question what his motivations are. At the same time, as he said, we had Taniela Tupou coming out and saying, well, if this is going to go ahead, you might as well sack all of us. But at the same time, then you've got people like Will Genia coming out and saying, it was on a Fox Sports podcast, that, it's made it a bit uncomfortable for people to, within those team environments, to relate to him and moving forward even to play with him.
So, because there's been in the past, David Pocock, who's a great ally of the LGBTI community, who's also a devout Christian. He's actually in the past, at the last incident, they brought David in to sort of have a few words with Israel about this. So it must be also, I know we're talking more about the sport, but it must be affecting the team.
Yes.
It's taken away the attention off preparation. We've got the World Cup in September. But we're talking over and over again for the last 4 weeks. It's been these homophobic comments over and over almost every day in the media.
Yeah. It's really disappointing as a fan that this is where it's got to with respect to the sport. People are talking more about this rather than the sport itself. And it makes it, really difficult to say, okay, well, how are we going to be able to move on from this? How long is this issue going to continue to be talked about, especially when you have when it would seem that he would have this kind of support from some players within his community, and some players saying that they aren't comfortable with it.
The NRL legend Ian Roberts, who's also an out and proud gay man, he was on Nine's Sports Sunday this morning, and he spoke about the how these words, how they could be the catalyst that pushes not just a young LGBTIQ person, but anyone struggling with their sexuality over the edge and to take their life. And he sort of stressed, he's not the cause of it, but he might be that final straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah. Young people face a lot of pressures, especially when they're young and dealing with their sexuality, whether it be, the fear of being outed against their will, family pressures.
And young LGBTIQs have a higher rate of suicide, particularly young. It's like usually their first attempt of suicide is often around the age of 16 or before they're coming out. So on the back of like was it last year's marriage equality? Yeah, it was last year. And then sort of these comments in the media every day with no consequences. While we've made progress, it's sort of in a way we're kind of we're still fighting the old fight.
I mean, the bottom line is, I think it seems as though he's trying to spin it as something that's, he's being attacked for his religious beliefs. But the bottom line is that people have no problem with his religious beliefs, but it's when they cross over into, expressing negative views and what really is hateful language about other groups in the community is where you draw the line. That's what needs to stop.
It's expressing them publicly and bringing the sport, which is trying its best to be inclusive, into disrepute.
Yeah. And when you have, as I said before, people like Taniela Tupou saying, Idol sacked a lot of us, it opens the question, like, well, how many people in this sport have the same views about homosexuality as Israel Folau does?
Yeah. And it pushes back again to what we were sort of saying, that there isn't just one type of gay man, for example. There is a wide variety, and we come in all different shapes and sizes and interests. And I don't know about you, but personally, I threw out my Wallabies jersey after they kind of went, oh, well, maybe, it took them a couple of days. And this, as I said, this wasn't the first time. So as a fan of the sport, it did the AIRU sort of has left a bad taste in my mouth about supporting the Wallabies.
But on the flip side, there are also a wide variety of sports people, and some of them are gay. How would Israel Folau react if one of the Wallabies was also gay?
Yeah.
How would, the AIU react?
Well, after the last time he made the comments, the All Blacks came out with, whether it was they had it on file or it was done very quickly, it was a beautiful diversity video. And if you get a chance, look up All Blacks diversity. It is a beautiful piece of inclusion. All races, all sexualities, genders are welcome not only to be spectators of the sport, but to play the sport.
Yeah.
On that, we'll move on to our last topic, which is in the last, I think it's the last day or two, The Lancet published a paper kind of confirming something that we've known since 2011, which was that if a person who's HIV positive gets on medication and stays on medication and gets an undetectable viral load, they literally cannot pass on the HIV virus. However, I don't know about you, but I've seen a number of reports that have been describing it as AIDS. And there was one headline from, and I'm sad to say, from SBS here in Australia, which is a very inclusive, very diverse broadcaster. It read, AIDS drug stops sexual transmission of HIV, study found. Again, well, in New South Wales, we've stopped, the AIDS epidemic was declared over in 2016. what do you think this sort of language, this archaic language, has on an impact on members of the community?
It's, this is a battle that our community has been fighting for many, many years. And it seems as though, at least perhaps just from the media community at the very least, there's still a very distinct lack of understanding of the facts, the language, where we are.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be the domain of health professionals to know this kind of stuff.
No, but even within so my main field is working within STIs, and even health professionals don't seem to know actually how far we've progressed. As I said, this story is making news, but we've known about this stuff since 2011. We've come a long way. I remember it was a couple of weeks ago, I was at a conference where a health professional got up, was talking about queer mental health, and sort of said, second slide, that HIV AIDS is still an issue, with the slide going up to about 2016. A lot has actually changed. And even diagnosis rates have come down. We've got multiple tools at our disposal to help people who are both infected with HIV, but also to prevent the contraction of it. And this doesn't seem to be getting through.
So why do you think then that this made it to be a headline?
That is a good question. It was confirming what we knew. That was like the headline, like 8-year follow-up. It's 8 years follow-up, but the actual original studies, which included one from Australia called The Opposites Attracts, there was hundreds of hours of what they call sexual interactions, where in serodiscordant couples, where one person has HIV, the other one's HIV negative, and if a person had an undetectable viral load, it wasn't transmitted. So they were having unprotected sex. They weren't using any prophylaxis. We've known about this for some time. I'm assuming it was a slow news day. It's great. More evidence is great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But on top of that, there's also, AIDS drugs.
That the use of AIDS, it's also a misunderstanding of what AIDS is. HIV is the virus. AIDS is a combination or a constellation of opportunistic infections that happen because of the HIV virus attacking the immune system. And I think it was that headline, AIDS drug stops sexual transmission. AIDS can't be transmitted. It's nothing. It's not an actual tangible thing. It's the result of
untreated HIV.
Yeah. And I think maybe part of the problem was AIDS was named first. So I think it was around 1982 that AIDS was, and then 2 years later HIV was discovered and named. But by then AIDS was in the public psyche, and there was those Grand Reaper ads of the AIDS, so everyone knows AIDS, but still it's been it's over 35 years, 36 years. The language should have changed, and particularly organisations like SBS should be on top of that. Well, that sort of brings us to the end of our first episode. I hope you got something out of it. Next time I'll be looking at the sort of the 6 stages, of coming out. In the next week, there will also be our new podcast, STI News, which will be looking at more of the latest research and news around STIs. It's going to be very interesting. So for myself and Sam, thank you for listening.